Hello and welcome to the Soham Roy Show. Today in this episode, we have with us one of the finest guitar makers of this century, Mr. Stephen Hill. Welcome, Mr. Stephen, to our show.
Thank you very much. That's a big honor you bestow on me. I have to say I'm one of many great guitar makers, and I follow also the great masters. I'm one in the line of master guitar makers. So thank you for the acknowledgement. And but I have to acknowledge all my great masters before me: Antonio Torres, many Manuel Reyes, many great makers who have now passed on to the next life, and I'm one of the makers now, holding the flag, so to speak, in this century. Yes. So
Right.
thank you very much for your.
It's an
Yes.
honor to have you here, Stephen. And
Thank
the first thing I wanted to ask you that how did you sort of becoming a luthier? I mean, what went inside your mind?
it's a curious thing it's a curious thing how we become whatever we become in our lives. For me, it happens to be that I'm a guitar maker, and if you look at my family history and things, it's not really necessarily, you couldn't say that yes, he was destined to be a guitar maker, because my father wasn't a guitar maker, my grandfather wasn't a guitar maker, nor were
Right.
they woodworkers in any shape or form. My father had a very different occupation from what I do now. But I think, we have certain predispositions to do certain jobs. And you could say that we
Right.
have also somehow almost a divine predisposition, a speciality, a talent, which could be in many different ways to develop. But somehow I've managed to become a guitar maker, which is a very beautiful and interesting profession. So if I give you a very brief history, when I was, well, actually going back to when I was probably 2 or 3 years old or something like that, my parents used to listen to the LPs, the vinyl LPs, and they used to listen to a lot of world music. So I would listen to Mexican music, I would listen to Greek music, um, but I also listened to pure flamenco music,
Wow.
what we call cante hondo, which is the proper flamenco, Soleares and Sevilla, Seguerías and things, with the singing and guitar. So at a very early age, I listened to this music, maybe only for a period of time or something like that. Anyway, later on, when I was 16, I was living on a farm, big farm in Sussex, in the southern part of the United Kingdom, and surrounded by trees and nature. And I didn't do very well. I'm quite clever, I would say, but I didn't do very well at school in the last year, 6 months even. So when I left school, I immediately, at the age of 16, which is very young to leave your formal education, I immediately got a job with a friend of mine making furniture, making pine
Okay.
furniture, tables and things like this. So very quickly, literally the next day when I left school, I went straight into a workshop. So from the age of 16, I was working with wood, which actually, if you look at great established, many great guitar makers have also had that tradition. They've been a cabinet maker, in Spanish, ebanista, we call it a furniture maker. And they
Okay.
had that basic experience in a workshop with tools and things like that. And then somehow they've managed to find their way into guitar making. So the same with me. Um, I started playing classical guitar when I was 8 years old. So I was studying classical guitar from 8. A full-size instrument, little boy, 8 years old, with a full-size classical guitar. And I carried on my studies all the way through. And there was a moment where I went to a new teacher and I saw his guitar. I was maybe 17, nearly 18 maybe, and I saw his guitar, which was a very fine instrument with Brazilian rosewood, spruce top, and a label. And I said, "What's this? What's your guitar?" Because my guitar was a factory guitar from Valencia. "What's your guitar?" Oh, I said, "This is guitar made by a great maker, one of the great British makers, Brian Cohen." And I said, "Really?
Yeah.
What, one guy?" And then there was his name on the label. And he said, yeah, this is one guy. He works in his workshop, small workshop, and he makes these guitars. And he charges £2,000 or something like that. And I was like, and it was like, bing, that's it. It was like a moment of a light bulb going on. That's what I want to do. And so this was in sort of 1985. And at the same time, I went to see a lute concert, you know, Renaissance lute, by a beautiful player called Stephen Stubbs. And the sound of his instrument was so pure. You could hear the wood, you could hear everything. It was so pure. It absolutely moved me to tears. And I wanted to actually make a lute. So I went and I bought a kit from the early music store in London. I bought this kit. And I spent in 1985, I spent 1 year on the kitchen table making this instrument, which actually I'm going to turn it around. You can see is over there on the wall there.
Oh, wow.
You saw that.
It's
That was
amazing.
made in 1985. It still sits there. I should really string it up again. But that was my first instrument. After that, then I started a series of things, and I found a violin maker, and I did a few repairs on instruments just to sort of get an idea of what it was to touch instruments, or to manipulate, to adjust things, or to refinish things like that. Then I then started violin making lessons with a real master violin maker, Dominic Excel, near where I lived, and I went to him once or twice a week and learned many things about tool sharpening. I learned about perfection. Violin makers are really, generally speaking, very perfectionist, probably more so than guitar makers. But he had great influence on me and learned and taught me many things about the perfection of woodworking. After that, I did a short course and things, but it was always like, and then I discovered flamenco music, and I heard flamenco for the first time. So I thought, so I played me some flamenco, and it was like, oh, I've heard this before. I heard this music before.
Right.
And then later on, I discovered that my parents had played flamenco when I was 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 or 3 years old. So so then suddenly flamenco came into the picture, the Spanish guitar, flamenco. That was my journey. So I started to make instruments to find out how I built a Baroque guitar based on Antonio Stradivarius, the great violin maker. He built a number of instruments, a number of guitars, sorry. And people think of him as a violin maker, which he was, but he also built at least four or five beautiful guitars, Baroque guitars. So I built a copy of one which is in the Ashmolean Museum in England. Then I built a classical guitar. I built this instrument. Then I built my first flamenco guitar, and after that, then I went to Spain. I heard of a flamenco guitar making course, 2-week course in southern Spain. So I went with my tools, my car, everything, all my wood, all in the back of the car, and I drove to Spain at the age of, by this time I was 21, having built some instruments already and done some short courses and things. So I arrived in Spain, I did the course, and I visited some very famous makers. Of course, I went to the Ramirez workshops in Madrid. I went to see Manuel Reyes, who was the greatest living flamenco guitar maker, really, of this last century. He died very recently. He was very generous and very kind, and showed me some things. And then I eventually arrived in Granada, which is, in a sense, what we call the capital of the guitar in the world. Really, Granada, I think, has probably the biggest concentration of guitar makers, traditional Spanish making Spanish instruments in the world, really. And I think we are probably around about 35 to 40 different makers in the province of Granada. All come together. We have an association as well, where we share certain things, ideas, and we occasionally meet as a big group of guitar makers. You're talking of the world's finest makers. The Bellidos. We're talking of Marin Montero, Paco Santiago, Manuel Diaz, more modern makers, Daniel Chiesa, there's Pepe Vigil, some great young makers as well. Because I wouldn't call myself particularly young these days, although some people, I'm 50. I think I'm 56, I think. So I've been making instruments now for 37 years. So
That's
I'm a sort
amazing.
of a veteran builder. So
Also building the
so that's
dreams of many people.
yeah, exactly. So then really that's my story really sort of developed then from I went back to the UK. I carried on making guitars, set up my workshop, and then since then I've been working and developing my art over the years, really. And I decided to come back to Spain, so I have arrived in Spain back again in 2004 to set up a workshop here, and I've been in this village of La Herradura, which is in the southern part below Granada, the capital city of the province of Granada.
Okay.
And La Herradura is famous for two things. One is it's a very beautiful place. The other thing is that Andres Segovia had a house here.
Yes.
Some aficionados may have seen the film Los Olivos,
Los
which
Olivos,
was an
yes.
interview with Segovia.
Yes.
Just if I out my door around, I could see his house, top of the
Wow.
hill, beautiful location, 360, amazing location. And that was his retreat, his sort of summer house, his retreat where he had the house built for himself. And I now know the current owner very well, so I quite often go up there, and I often take guitar players up there as well. So based on Andres Segovia's presence in the village, then it formed around his name the Andres Segovia International Guitar Competition, which is held
Yes.
every year, which we have some of the world's finest players coming to compete here. I mean, you
Yes.
name the big players, that they've all been here. And so that's a sort of really quite an interesting place to be. And I've set up quite a big workshop. And I also teach guitar making I do international courses, and I teach guitar making 2 or 3 courses a year. So each year I'm teaching between 12 and 20 people
Wow.
the guitar making from here, from Spain. They come from all over the place, even from India. I've had from Australia, China, Japan, you name it. They've come and studied with me. So many. I've taught probably more than 300 people, I think, in this in a 1 month period of time
Wow, that's
here.
amazing. And you're
So
just going on passing your legacy and lineage on to people.
yes, it is a bit of a lineage, and quite a few people have gone on to be professional makers, and also have decided to do some teaching as well. So in a sense, they're following on the lineage, which one day I'll do a sort of family tree to see,
Right.
who come through my hand, so to speak. And
Right.
but it's something I think it's very important for the classical guitar world, as well as the flamenco guitar world, is that instruments of a high caliber are continue to be produced, and not just a sort of mass production of instruments, because it's very
Right.
easy to buy cheap instruments. So I'm trying to keep alive the tradition of the Spanish guitar building techniques and the Granada techniques for building, and to try and keep that strong. So that there's been, as I said, many people have come through the workshop and had the experience of building, and which I think is a very valuable thing. If it's 300 people, there's not that a lot of people in terms of the population of
Yes,
the planet.
absolutely.
But the guitar making, as the guitar world, as we know, is fairly small, and it's wonderful to see people actually having the experience of really working by hand to really achieving a really beautiful instrument. It's such an amazing experience for people to
And
do
also classical
that.
guitar playing is such a subtle art. Playing with a nylon string is such a subtle art that you need to have that kind of experience and expertise to just produce an instrument which is kind of a dream, which can bring life to the music of the player.
Yes, exactly. Because a great player will be able to interpret a mediocre instrument
Right.
very well, but a great instrument and has a great player is pure magic. Is pure
Absolutely.
absolutely pure magic. So, and that's our aim, is to, as builders, is to produce instruments to the highest possible quality that we can, and to produce magic waiting to happen, so to speak.
Right.
So, and it's a beautiful marriage of the player, because without the player, we are we don't exist. Without the presence of guitar makers, then the guitar doesn't exist for the player. So we are a very important synergy to establish. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
We could talk for hours about these things, but yeah, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just lost. I mean, what amazing your journey has been throughout the years.
Yes. Yeah, they say the Englishmen in Spain get making guitars,
Right.
making the. And I think these people, the people in the village, are quite proud of me. That they all know me as the guitarrero of the pueblo, of the
Guitarrero.
village, and I'm the
Yes.
guitarrero. And so they all know where the guitarrero is, and I think that I'm very proud as well to be here in a sense representing the part of the Spanish culture. So it's a unique thing. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Right. So you have restored one of the finest guitars by the old masters. What have you learned during the process?
Yes, for those who know their guitars, I've handled almost all of the great guitars from the great masters. So if I quote,
Right.
for instance, Antonio de Torres, I've had a few Torres instruments in my hands. I've done some small work on them because it's a big responsibility. I didn't have to do
Yes.
any big work, but small work. Um, and when you play an original Torres instrument, which is what the modern classical guitar, in a sense, is what the traditional modern guitar is based on, of his work in the 1850s to 1870s, 1880s. When you play an instrument, an original Antonio de Torres instrument, and you pluck it and you sense its vibration, what you're playing at that moment is the creation of the first type of that instrument. It's a prototype. And so it's
Right.
not just a guitar, it's not just another copy of all the guitars that have been built. It's actually the instrument that is it's the new instrument in those days. And it has a certain magic about it. It's like he was the only person building in that style, and you could see his creative process. You could see his fascination with what he was trying to achieve as a guitar maker in his instruments. And they are very old. Some of them are I'm talking of what 150 years old, something like that. But they are so unique and such beautiful voice. Some of them, and velvet and delicacy and also some strength and really special instruments. But then I've played many and worked on many guitars. I mean, just, Robert Boucher, Friedrich, Reyes, many guitars from Manuel Reyes in the flamenco world. I could name almost all of the top instruments, and I've handled them all. So what have I learned from those instruments? What I've learned is first of all respect for the great masters, that
Right.
they were not like us, where we can very easily copy anything that we see around us, which is a lot of life these days is about copying. But they were the creators. They were they were striving to create what the market wanted, which was a certain type of sound. But they knew the sound that they wanted to create, and that's why the great master guitars stand out, because they were questing for the sound that they heard, and that's what they produced. Now we quest for the perfection to be a copy of one of those great masters. And I think it's very important as modern makers is that we greatly respect the work of the masters who have gone before us, but we must develop our own individual voice to represent who we are in terms of a guitar making
Absolutely.
experience. So yeah, so it's a synergy. It's a fantastic experience of touching these great instruments and looking inside and sensing and all these things. But then we mustn't copy. We must absorb and then reproduce something of our own,
Right.
following the tradition.
Uh, what factors dictate your wood choices for a particular build?
Well, we are in a sense dictated to by tradition. So for the classical guitar, we would normally use a cedar or Western red cedar, or we would use a European spruce. Now there are other timbers available like redwood, which I don't like. There's things like Sitka, it's too hard. Engelmann, yeah, I'm sure there's some wonderful Engelmann spruce, but I always come back to the two main timbers, which are the European spruce, what we call Pino Abeto, and then
Okay.
the cedar, North American cedar. And for me, the spruce is the great noble European material which develops over time. It smells amazing when you're working at it, and it's really, you can really sense the tradition of instrument makers using that timber, and it matures beautifully. With the cedar, was a new material really brought in by Ramirez in the 60s,
Yes.
and can be a stunning material offering a different quality of sound. So it depends what I'm building. If I'm building a modern lattice guitar, for instance, like in the same style as that Guy Ryan, who I believe has been to India the past few
Yes.
years, then he is playing a cedar topped lattice instrument. And the reason why I use the cedar is because it has offers a certain warmth compared to if you're using a lattice grid system. It offers a certain warmth to the sound, whereas with spruce, it's a little bit cold and almost too hard. So the cedar softens that sound of the lattice. Back and sides, of course, the greatest timber we could use would be Brazilian rosewood, and which is very difficult to get hold of these days. Well, I would say it's very easy to get hold of if you want to pay a lot of money. You can
Right.
buy raw material for 1,000 euros up and up, just the raw material,
Wow.
which really is, and I've made probably, I don't know, in the past, I've made probably in the region of at least 50 or 60 or more Brazilian rosewood guitars. When I was starting out, it was very easy to get hold of. Then, of course, then CITES certification has become much stronger and much more controlled. So, and the pricing gone up. So we're looking for alternatives for the classical guitar, for instance, Madagascan rosewood, which is also now becoming more complicated, more rare. We're using timbers like siricote from Mexico. There are many timbers that we can use. Of course, the other king of classical guitar making material for back and sides is, of course, rosewood from India. So
Yes.
this is a very great sort of tradition in the classical world. For instance, Jose Romanillos used a lot of Indian rosewood in his guitars, and it's a very, very fine material, offering not quite as sort of clarity and sharp and sound like Brazilian, sort of has a peculiar quality of sound, but it's slightly more warm, but also bright and immediate in its tone, but it keeps a depth in the sound. Indian rosewood, a fine Indian back and sides is really splendid material. So I'm using more Indian rosewood. I'm using quite a lot of Madagascan rosewood and quite a lot of siricote. Let me show you here. This is Indian here. Nice, colourful set of Indian rosewood. Just in the
Wow.
last stages of finishing in that. So it's a very pretty instrument. This is, in fact, a double top guitar, a modern instrument with spruce and cedar internal top. So this one is going to Sikas guitars in Germany. And then we have here another alternative, which is siricote, which is spectacularly beautiful material.
Look at the grains of it.
Oh, it's really incredible, really
This is
incredible.
wow.
And it's stunning material. This is a traditional Granada type instrument with a single top spruce, European spruce, very fine spruce top, a Torres type instrument, which will be going to Guitar Salon in the United States, in California.
Wow.
So, and then I would like to show you one more of the Madagascar. So here we have a typical, this is one of my concert guitars. It's hard to see, but again, it's this lovely, beautiful, dark material here,
Oh, this is
and
amazing. And
and a
that
very
layer of
reflective
shellac.
sound. Yeah, this is all French polished. Yeah, this is a guitar from 2018, which actually has just come back to me for a repolish, and just a sort of a new setup really. And this is actually for sale. So whoever wants to buy this is for sale right now. And I've just put the strings back onto again today, so it's now ready to go. This is a lattice instrument, which is the same as what Gary Ryan is playing, and Manus Noble and Declan Sapala and other people. So this is, in a sense, one of the styles of instrument that I'm known for is my lattice guitars, which is sort of a fusion between the modern guitar and the traditional guitar. They're not big, heavy guitars like, for instance, Smallman Australian guitars. They're not built in the same heavy way. They're still very vibrant and not as heavy, fairly lightweight, but very strong, powerful instruments, great concert guitars. So this is another alternative to the, this Madagascan Rosewood, which is
This
stunning.
guitar just needs a pair of good hands. That's it.
It does. It
Magic
does.
will come out.
I would play it for you now, but my nails are really, really bad. They're all broken. I'm doing so much French polishing at the moment. I think I've got one good nail on my third finger here, and that's about it. And it's just, I was quite a good player in my time. I could play
Yes.
all the data keys and all the source studies and many things like that. But these days, I'm really, I'm so busy. I'm a father of 5 children. It's a busy life for me, and so one day I'm hoping that when I'm less busy, I'll be sitting down again and studying classical guitar again, and
Absolutely.
gain my techniques again. So yes, yeah. I assume you're a good player, an accomplished player. You are.
Yes, kind of.
Yes, I think I've seen some videos of you as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, which is great. Super. One of the ambassadors of the Spanish guitar in India, I'm sure.
Thank you so much, sir.